In this video we're going to discuss formatting labels in Softtree's terrain module. So to start, I'm just going to work in the plan view. The other views behave very similarly. So I'm going to right click Plan Options, and I can have my labels turned on. I can expand this and I can see that I have contour labels turned on and floating labels turned on. Now I don't have contours, so I won't be able to see those. And floating labels, I don't have floating labels yet either, so I won't be able to see those. So before we go any further, let's just define a floating label. So in brackets here we can see not attached to a feature. So what floating labels are is the ability for the user to annotate their drawing wherever they'd like. So I can right click, edit labels with mouse, and if I'm outside the snapping tolerance of an existing label, and in this case I don't have any other labels shown, I can click anywhere and I can type. So I can say example text. We can hit OK, and there we are. Now we can move this label around, so I can grab it. So within the snapping tolerance, my cursor changes. I can pull that around. If I want to have a leader on this, I can double click it, go into my position and say, well, leader, let's add an arrow. And now if I pull this, my anchor point stays at the same location, but I can move my text. Now if I go to the anchor point, my cursor changes again, and I can pick that up and I can drag it wherever I'd like. Now with that, we can edit this, so I can change my font size. Let's change that here. I can change my color. There we are. And I can see here that I'm blotting out part of a point. Now if I edit this, I can turn transparent on, and I can see the features and text underneath of it now. So that's our label tab. We can go to the position tab and I can say, well, I want to change my leader to be 10 millimeters long, and I want to change the angle of that to be on a 45, and I want to put a box around this text. And there we are. So I changed that tabularly rather than moving it manually. And I can move the position, so if I want that leader on the other side, I can switch that direction and away we go. If I want to flip the text from being on the top of that line to the bottom, I can change this vertical offset from a positive to a negative, and there we are. Now I like that being the other way around, so I'm going to change that back, but I can also switch the justification from left to right to middle. So there we are. And if I set that at middle, set that at 0, we're right through. I'm going to delete that. So we just quickly ran through what a floating label is defined as and what our options are for positions. Now let's look at labels that are attached to features. So I'm going to go right click in my plan view, plan options, and I'm going to control these labels globally. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, let's look at our elevations. So I'll turn that on. I can see every point has an elevation associated with it. Now with this, since these are attached to features, in my position, I have the option for whether that is position is based off the feature or if it's absolute. So if I set this to be absolute, right now that leader is bisected, the angle bisected between the legs on either side. I set it at 0, everything's orientated north-south. Now, we have those where we'd like them, so we've moved things around tabularly, and we can see we have the access to make those changes on a global level. And when I was doing the changes for our floating label, we could just move things around as we see fit. We can do the same for these feature labels. It's just when we have added label with mouse, if we go within the snapping tolerance of an individual feature, we can pull that around, or we can tabularly change it as we did with our floating label. So I'm going to pull that around and say that I decide that that's an excellent spot and I want the position of all my other labels to be based off of that. I'm going to just move this one here too for a moment. So if I'm happy with this and I want all these other labels to be formatted similarly, I can come in here and I can say, well, set as class default label formatting. I'll hit OK. And everything is adjusted to match that formatting, except for this label down here. And the reason for that is I didn't turn this button on. So that resets anything that we've already customized. Now everything, including the features or the labels that we've already moved around, are set to match that format. So I don't like that. I'm going to go in here and change it back to what it was. So format, reset, retrieve system default for selected classes. Okay. We can see that goes back to what we had, and away we go. Now, we also have these labels that are showing up at individual points. Our floating labels weren't associated with any features or points. We can have labels that are associated just with features. So an example of that is if I come in here, turn on my labels, and turn on feature name, and I'm going to make this red. We can see we have feature names being displayed now. But on these features with multiple points in them, in this case that feature name is only showing up where it's told to. And in this case it's at the beginning of our feature. So that's useful to know, and if we take that, we can add a lot of flexibility to things. So with this, we have all of these kind of predefined labels set up for us, but down here we have these user-defined labels. So in this example, let's look at, well, if I want to show my feature name, but if I don't want to show that -0 or -592, I can do that. And if I want to show that feature name at each of the points it's associated, I can do that as well. So I'm going to go in here, user defined, I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to click the options that I like. So I'm going to call this point code. So currently, if I was to define this, I would have it set to be a feature point, so it's only associated with one label per feature, and I would set the text to be my feature name. Now I want that at each one of these points, so I'm going to leave the attribute type at point. I want the label to be shown at each individual point rather than at the leg before or after the point. which I'll talk about later. And I'm going to define the text I'd like associated with this. So here I'm going to go into name, and I have my ID. We'll hit OK. I'm going to set my position to be based off the feature. And there we are. So BO B5. There we go. G rather than G593. So we can see the difference between feature name and the ID that we've customized for ourselves. Now when I was referring to that forward or backward leg, if I want to have attributes associated with the line between 2 points, I can. So let's go in here. I'll make a new user-defined label. I'll call it slope distance. Point type is point. I want to go with the forward leg. And for my attributes, I'm going to go based off of forward leg. And we'll define our slope distance. We'll hit OK. We'll hit OK. And there we are. I can see my slope distance is defined there. Slope distance is defined there. Now, the last thing I'll mention here is, so far we've been controlling these features globally. Let's turn off all of these labels that we've created globally, and if we're only interested in seeing them with a single feature, we can. So I'm going to actually select multiple features. I'll turn that on for these 3 features. Rather than going plan options, I'll go modify selected features, labels. I'll turn on the information I'd like to see. And there we are. That's applied to just the features that we have selected.